Hello everyone, welcome back to the Rocks and Change YouTube channel. My name's Fleur Hastings and today I'm going to show you how to make this absolutely stunning weave called Viperscale. Now Viperscale is part of the Persian family. It's very closely related to weaves called Arkham and GSG or Great Southern Gathering. It's a really beautiful decorative weave. It's quite dense, as in it's quite a nice thick chunky bracelet, but it's got this real beautiful lace-like look to it. Now to make Viperscale we need jump rings of an aspect ratio of around 6. You can go a little tiny bit higher but not much. I've used jump rings that are 5.5 inner diameter made on a 0.9 wire, which gives you an aspect ratio of 6.1, but you could use a 6mm inner diameter jump ring that's made on a 1mm wire that gives you that 6 aspect ratio. Obviously that will be slightly more chunkier than this one as in the width because you've got slightly bigger jump rings, but I think it's absolutely beautiful. So you're going to need your tools to make this, and the tools that I always use are my chain nose and flat nose pliers. I absolutely adore these pliers. I do have these pliers for sale on my website as well. I will pop a link in the description below to the plier kit and also to the kit for making the Viperscale as well. I always find it easy easy and handy to have a knotting awl or something like a piece of wire or something like that, just to decipher where your next jump rings are going to go, or to hold a jump ring in place or out of the way while you put your next jump ring in. And for this weave we're going to use some sticky tape or masking tape, whichever you have. I find masking tape easier because you can write on it, because we need to decipher with this weave which is the front and which is the back. Okay, so you can see here, this is my starter section here. Okay, so to get started, I'm going to use the large jump rings that I always use, just so you can see that a little bit better. So to start this weave off, we're going to need 3 single jump rings linked together. Okay, and as we lay it down onto your work surface, we can see that this center jump ring is pointing up and away from us. So I'll just lift that up so you can see. So you can see that it's on the top of these two and it's on the bottom with the side that's pointing to yourself. Now, like I say, this is part of the Persian weave. So when we talk about Persian weaves, we talk a lot about the eye, or where 2 jump rings cross over, it creates this wonderful eye shape or marquee shape. So if we look at this little section here, we're going to just number the gaps. So from left to right, we're going to have gap number 1, gap number 2, gap number 3 and gap number 4. So 2 and 3 are the eye shapes and 1 and 4 are the outside edges. Okay, so it's easier to get this weave started if it's stable. You can either wire this in place or you can use something like your sticky tape or your masking tape, and I just take one section and go over the top and then turn it over, and one section over the other, over the back, and then write front and back on there just so you know which way you're working. We can still see our holes here. Now, because obviously these are very large jump rings, if this masking tape covers all of your jump rings in the correct size, all you need to do is just poke holes in those gaps so that you can still get your first jump rings through. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to take 2 open jump rings and we're going to put our first row in. Now this first row, we're working on the front. I'll just pick it up. Sometimes you find it's easier to pick it up, especially when it's stable like this. I'm going to come up through gap number 2. So in effect, I've come up through the eye of this first 2 jump rings here, and I'm going to go over into gap number 4. So I've gone through the eye of this pair and I've gone around the eye of this pair, and I'm going to close that jump ring up. Okay, so I've got my first jump ring in place. So that's gone from gap number 2 to gap number 4. My second jump ring, I'm going to take from gap number 1 over to gap number 3. And you can see that it's lower down. So the first gap jump ring that I've added is higher up. The second one is lower down, so it's further down towards me. And it's gone through gap number 1 and into gap number 3. So it's gone around the first eye and into the second eye. Now these jump rings don't cross over, they sit side by side, so just make sure you don't connect anything together. We've now got these 2 jump rings here. Now if we just turn it that way, you can see that these 2 now have created an eye shape. So if we look at the gaps here, we've got gap number 1, gap number 2, which is our eye shape, or half of our eye shape, and gap number 3. Okay, we're going to take an open jump ring and we're going to replicate what this gold jump ring is doing. So by taking hold of my open jump ring, I'm going to go through the first gap, over the eye shape. So if I just turn it so you can see, so over the eye shape and down through the third gap, sorry. I'll just do that again for you. So there's your jump rings. You're going to come up through the gap that's on the left, gap number 1, over the top of gap number 2 and down through gap number 3 and close. So I've now got this jump ring which is sitting directly on top of the previous gold jump ring. I now need to add in another row to replicate these black jump rings. So I need 2 of my black jump rings. Now this row can be a little bit tricky to get started, just so you can see where it's going. But in essence, what you're going to do is you're going to come up through the eye of those red jump rings, but you're going to go behind the gold jump ring that you've just added. Okay, so I'll just zoom right in just so you can see what I did there. So we can see the eye, the red eye here of these 2 red jump rings. Okay, so we're going to go through the eye but behind the gold jump ring. So the jump rings will sit on top of the bottom part of the gold jump ring but underneath the top of the gold jump ring. So if I just put that in place, you'll see what I mean. So take my open jump ring. Now the way that I do it is I keep that bottom jump ring flat, so it's pointing away from me, so the bottom of the jump ring is lowest down. I'm going to go through the eye and go up behind that jump ring. So if I just pick it up and turn it, you can see. Okay, so again, that's what I've got. So this bottom jump ring is pointing down, so I'm going to go through the eye and behind that gold jump ring. I'm going to close that up and I'm going to let that sit to the left hand side. Okay, so you can see it's sitting there on the left. I'm going to take another open jump ring and I'm going to go through the eye and behind the gold jump ring again, exactly the same. But this time when I close, it's going to sit to the right. Okay, so now I've got my 2 black jump rings, which are replicated, imaging the first 2, the gold jump ring, which is imaging the gold jump ring. My next move is to turn this weave over and place in the 2 red jump rings. Okay, so what I'm going to do, so you can see at the minute we're on the front, I'll just zoom back out again a little bit. There we go. So I'm now going to turn my work over onto the back. Okay, and you can see now, I mean it's quite a dense weave this, but you can still just about see I've got my initial 4 gaps that I had before. Just ignore the red jump rings. All we're looking at is the black, gold, black jump ring. So I've got gap number 1, 2, 3 and 4. Okay, now these red jump rings, this is going to be your repeating pattern from now on. The first red jump ring, if I pick it up, I always find it easier to pick it up so you can see a little bit easier there, is going to go through gap number 1 and down through gap number 3. So I've gone around the eye formed here and down through the eye formed there and close. And then that moves to the top, because don't forget we need to get another jump ring in here. So that one's the top, the furthest most jump ring up, and I take my next open jump ring. Now this time, I'm just going to open that jump ring a little bit wider. There we go. So this time, this jump ring, if I've already gone through gap number 1 and gap number 3, this second jump ring goes through gap number 2 and down through gap number 4. Okay, so you can see there it's exactly the same as what happened before. So it's gone this time gap number 1 to gap number 3, gap number 2 to gap number 4, and this one is the lowest one down, and you'll see when I turn it over why it's the lowest one down. Okay, and close. So that's working on the back. Okay, now when I turn my work back over, I've now got the same repeating pattern with the red jump rings. Okay, so you can see the red jump rings now are stacked in the same way as they were before. So the right hand jump ring is on top of the left hand jump ring. Okay, you can see that there quite clearly. So now I can then go ahead and take my open jump ring, and now all we're going to do is we're going to work in that middle section now. I'm going to put that single jump ring in place. So taking my open jump ring, I'm going to go up through the first gap, over the top of the second gap, and down through the third gap. I'll just do that again for you so you can see that's my work. I'm going to go up through the first gap, over the top of the second gap, down through the third gap, and close. So I've now got that jump ring, which is now exactly the same and repeating that pattern. And don't forget, these jump rings are very large, so they don't hold the form correct because they're not in the proper aspect ratio, but it just shows you a little bit easier where the next jump rings are going to go. Okay, so I've now got my next 2 black jump rings. Now this is the one that's slightly tricky, so we're going through the eye of where the red jump rings have made, but we're going to go underneath the gold jump ring. Okay, so if I just pick that up, you'll be able to see we're going to go up through the eye of the 2 red jump rings, so you can see that's in the eye shape there, and behind the gold jump ring, and close. And that one goes over to the left, and then the next one exactly the same, through the eye shape and behind the gold jump ring. And don't forget, this is working from the front still, and over to the right. So I've now got the same repeating pattern again. I'll just zoom out a little bit for you. So we've got the same repeating pattern. We can see that the black jump rings are all stacking on top of each other. The red jump rings, the left hand side is underneath the right hand side, and the gold jump rings are all facing backwards, going up the spine of the weave. And now I'm going to turn my work over, and I'm going to just get another 2 red jump rings, and again remembering the pattern that we did from before. So we went through gap number 1 and into gap number 3, so through gap number 1 and into gap number 3, and close. And then we're going to go through gap number 2 and down through gap number 4, and close. Now that's the only thing we do on the back of the weave. We just put those jump rings in so that they're stacked the same. The left hand one is underneath when it's on the back of the weave. The left hand one's underneath. The right hand one, as you're looking at it, is on the top. When we turn that over, the left hand side is underneath. The right hand side is on the top. Okay, and then we can carry on going then. So taking our open jump ring, go through gap number 1 of the red jump ring, down through gap number 3 of the red jump ring to create my center spine, and then I will go and take another black jump ring, and this is the slightly tricky part where I have to go through the eye of the red jump rings but behind the gold, and close and let that fall down to the left. That red jump ring's just not closed properly, that's why it won't sit straight. There we go. And then taking my next gold jump ring, black jump ring, I'm going to go again exactly the same route through the eye of the red jump rings and behind the gold jump ring, and close, and then let that fall to the right. And that's both your stages done on the front side, so then you would flip it over, do your stage on the back side, and carry on going till you've got your bracelet length. Now for me, what I like to do with the clasp is I like to put a thicker jump ring, let's move that out of the way, a thicker jump ring as my centre, that single jump ring that goes around the eye of the 2 single jump rings. So in this case I've used a 3.75 that's made on a 1.25 wire. So it's slightly thicker, it brings it down to a nice neat point, and then you can add your clasp. I hope you've enjoyed this short tutorial on how to make this Viperscale weave. If you have any questions or queries, you can get in touch with me at www.rocksandchains.com. Fill out the contact form, or alternatively find me on social media where I am at rocksandchains, or on Instagram Fleur_rocksandchains. Thank you very much, and I will see you next time.